Are you thinking about creating an Amazon Web Services account for your business? Not sure where to start? In this topic, I give you an overview of the history of AWS and give you a quick tour of their user interface. So now we're going to take a look at the overview of Amazon Web Services. Of course, there's a lot to talk about with AWS and where they started, but I'm just going to go through just a real general high view of Amazon and how they got started. So in 2003, they, of course, had a little store called Amazon.com, and they wanted to, of course, had all the infrastructure for that. They had a lot of servers, and so they decided, hey, let's go ahead and take a look at this and see if we can sell this as an infrastructure for other people. And so this is where the AWS was at least talked about. And it wasn't until 2004 they started an SQS, which was Simple Queue Service, which is basically a messaging service. And so this was kind of like the beginning of Amazon Web Services, or AWS. In 2006 is when they officially started AWS and started selling the infrastructure as a service, and continued from there with the SQS. And then in 2010, of course, they moved everything, all their Amazon.com infrastructure into AWS, and that's where it is today. So that was basically the beginning of how everything started. Now, since then, from when they first started in 2010, and then this basically shows you the service and updates, the growth of AWS over time. And you can look at it in 2011, they had 82 updates or service updates, whatever you want to call that. And then now you can look in 2016, they had over 1,000. And then I think there was probably even more than that in 2016, but it goes on and on. And now it's to the point where I get updates from Amazon on a daily basis. A lot of them are updates or features, or some of them are bug fixes, but they're always adding to their services and updating and adding new ones. And so it's just a constant update for Amazon. It's very difficult to keep up with. It's almost a full-time job keeping up with their services, but they're growing very rapidly. And this basically kind of goes back to, this is the Gartner, where they talk about, they show their growth. And you can see here in the upper right-hand corner, up at the top here, you can see this is where Amazon Web Services, and then you've got Microsoft Azure, and then you've also got Google. And those are probably your three leaders for the most part. And this is as of 2017. And then you can see down here, this is where everybody's kind of fighting for where they fit. Some have decided to be more of a niche player, like Rackspace. Other ones are, Oracle's definitely trying to find where they fit into this, since Amazon is, you can now migrate Oracle to the Amazon Web Services and use their service now. That's kind of hurt Oracle as well, but that's always changing. The next slide here, we'll kind of look at how they stack up. This is 2015 through 2017, and you can kind of see where everybody was. Of course, Amazon, AWS is way up here. Microsoft was down here at the time, and of course, Microsoft is catching up. And then Google will probably eventually be in this upper right-hand corner in the next year or so as well. They're growing very fast. But I think the main thing to look here is that how Amazon has stayed up here, and the other players down here are all moving around, either going out of business or changing their structure of how they want to do things from there. Just a list of customers. There's a large list. I just wanted to grab a few here of what the word. Netflix is probably one of the biggest. It's always easy to see who is a customer of Amazon when one of their regions goes down, which has happened. I think it was a few years ago. They had, in the East Coast, they had a hurricane that took out one of the regions in, I think it was one of their East regions. And of course, Netflix and I think a lot of other big players went down at that time. And of course, Netflix probably learned a very powerful lesson that they've got to, have their data backed up in different regions, not just in one. Amazon had a problem with their S3 storage service about 6 months ago, and that caused a lot of problems with a lot of companies, including one of our project management software used Amazon as well for the storing of their documents. And at that time, for I think it was like 2 days, we couldn't store our documents in the project management software. So there are very many, thousands of customers that use Amazon either with their compute or storage and so on. So this just gives you a little idea of some of the big ones. Their infrastructure really is based on regions and zones, and basically availability zone is called an AZ, and that's what Amazon calls it, and that's what we'll talk about it moving forward. And really what a region is 2 or more availability zones. There are some places across the world that maybe just have one zone so far, but so we wouldn't really consider that more of a region. But 2 or more, there's some places here in the United States that have 4 regions. Mostly you'll see 3, and here you have 43 availability zones in 16 regions. And let's go ahead and take a look at that on the AWS website. Okay, so what I've really gone to is the AWS About page, and this is easy to find. You can even check out their global infrastructure. It's changing. So if you're looking at going into a certain region, or maybe you're in a region right now and you want to move into Europe, you can look at what kind of regions they have there. You can also see what's coming on here. They have here's 4 new regions that are coming soon. They're usually adding new regions every year, and of course they're adding more availability zones here as well. And you can see like North Virginia, in the Virginia region, they have 5 availability zones. Ohio, they have 3, and so on. So you can kind of go through here and see, and then explanation and so on. But this is just a good map to see where they're at. You can see that South Africa doesn't have anything. I'm not sure if I've never heard anything about them actually going in that area. It's probably more just because of population. I'm sure there'll be one there soon. But right now you can see this is their new places where they want to go right now. And go where they're going to head from there, and then new regions that they're going to add, or availability zones they're going to add in the regions. So this gives you an idea. It's something to really check. It's of course updated a lot. So, okay, now we're going to go back to our slides and look at the availability or zones. So next, when we talked about availability zones, we have 2 or more availability zones in a region. And so one way to look at a region, and the reason why you want to go maybe into the East Coast region or West Coast or wherever you may be or maybe in Europe, if you have one region and you're using several availability zones or 2 or more availability zones in that region, you're going to have low latency, meaning that they're closer together. So that means you're going to be able to, it'll be faster latency between there. And then the fault tolerance, of course, if one availability zone goes down, then you have another one, and then of course you have your redundancy, you have your backup. Now, of course, like I mentioned, when that hurricane hit the East region, that all the availability zones went down in that region. So that's why Netflix had the problems, and they didn't have some sort of a, I guess, different region kind of backup. And by doing that, you'll have better tolerance, better fault tolerance, meaning that if that region goes down, you can your whatever backup region can pick up and take over from there, and so that's where you have better fault tolerance. But of course, the downside to that is if you're using regions, you're going to have a little bit of a higher latency between the two since they're further apart. But of course, you can improve that with CDNs, or there's other ways that we can talk about that with VPCs. And then of course, you're going to have really good redundancy, and then you may have to meet a compliance or residency. Maybe you have to have your data stored in Europe or somewhere else, or maybe you have to have your data backed up in a different region, and that's of course using the different region is how you'll meet that compliance. Okay, so now we're going to talk about edge locations, which Amazon not only has the regions, and they have the locations, the different locations for their availability zones, but they also have edge locations, which are really is for their cloud delivery network, CDN, and those are endpoints for CloudFront. And they have several different locations, over 80 right now, and some services are not available in certain regions. So you may not be able to use the CloudFront in a certain region, so this is something you want to check with. So let's go ahead and take a look at that on the AWS site. So on this page here, I'm actually on the CloudFront main section here, and I'm at the product details. And you can see here, the reason why I came to this part is I just want to show you a description of all the different edge locations they have. And you can see here that they've got quite a few in the United States, in Europe, Australia. And so there's a lot of benefits to this. So for example, if you don't have maybe an availability zone or something in the region that you want to be in, more than likely you're going to have an edge location in there, and of course you can use their CloudFront CDN network to deliver that that your application or website in that area. If you need to, you can even upload documents or whatever that may be in those areas. So the edge locations really do a good job of covering places that maybe their regions or availability zones where they're not at in that location. So if you want more information on this, of course, changes a lot, but you can take a look at this anytime as well, and this will give you a good idea of any areas they're in or not in. So now we're going to go take a look at the AWS console, what they call the management console, and we're going to go through that here in a second. But what I want to talk about is that the AWS management console is basically an API access, and it's basically a user interface that Amazon has created, and then you can actually access this yourself through their APIs on the back end. And a lot of third-party vendors have done the same thing, to where you can go into their user interface and you're actually accessing AWS as well. So let's go ahead and take a look at the AWS site. Okay, so here we're in the AWS console, and what I want to do is just kind of go through this briefly with you before we go forward. So up here at the top, this is basically shows all the different, is more of like your dashboard, and here you can see that just takes you to the history of where you visited earlier, and you can see this is where here, and you can actually go through all your services, which we'll go over here in a second. And then what we have here is, once you go there, you have your services. You can go here too, and it also shows you the history. And then, of course, you can search if you want to search for anything as well. The next part is resource groups. Now, what resource groups are is if you're building, let's just say, for a project or for a customer, and when you go in there and you create a new EC2, those are a place where you can put tags. You can tag it. So let's just say it's for production or development or for ABC company. This is where you'd put that. And then what you could do is you click on resource groups, and then here will be the tags that you add. So let's say if we have development group, that development group will be here. You click on that, and then it'll show all the services that you're using for that customer, or for that group for production and so on. So that'll all be right here. So that's basically how resource groups works. It works really well when you have quite a few different resources running for different groups, developments, or whatever that may be. Now this is a pin. They just added this here not too long ago, but let's just say there's a service that you use a lot of. Let's just say we use RDS a lot. Then we'll just go ahead and put this up here like this. And then now that's up there, and you can use it. So now when we go back and forth, let's say we go here, that just stays up there. You click on it, and it goes from there. So now we'll just go back here, and we'll have it up there. If you want to add any more, then we can add, let's just say, we do a lot with Route 53. We'll put Route 53 up there, and there you go. So that's basically how the pin job works. If you have any notifications, if you set up any type of services, let's say you have an EC2 and there's a problem, then that'll be in here. If there's any schedule changes that are coming up that's going to affect anything that you're doing, that'll be here. Any kind of errors or issues when you're setting up any of your services, they're going to show up here, and so you'll have a little number right up there. And of course here you have all the information that you need here. You have your account, your organization, billing. If you're in billing, most of the time you won't have access to this because that's only set up for admin or for billing people. And then, of course, you can look at your security credentials. And then if you need to switch roles, which you really won't have to worry about here, but you can switch roles. If you're assigned to more than one role, you can do that here. Now, the region part of it, like we talked about, we showed all the different regions. And you can see this makes a big difference depending on what type of service you're using. So a lot of these services may not be available in all the different regions. So you really have to take look at what region you're in. So now we're in the Virginia region, whereas before you could see here we're in a global. So IAM is always in a global region, and you can see here that since I am in IAM right now, there's no regions available because it's a global. So any change you make in IAM will affect you in every single region that you're in, but you can also set up here. So for example, let's just say you have your developers are in the West Coast and they can go to Oregon, and they can set up their development, EC2s or whatever that may be in that area, and then you can have somebody over here in let's just say you have a group in Europe. You can go here and set it up there, and they can set up in that area as well. Now, by doing this, you have to make sure. So let's just say you set up an EC2 in the Frankfurt area, and then you come here to the Virginia and you check for that EC2 and it's not there, that's the reason why it's not showing, because you're in the North Virginia. So you really have to pay attention to where you're at in the regions and wherever you set up. Now you can get a dashboard view. The dashboard view will show you everything, and then when you click on it, it'll take you to that region, but that's basically how that works. So, and we'll talk about more of this as we move forward. With different services, at least you'll get an idea. So some of these things won't work in certain areas as well. So now that's an overview of the Amazon Web Services console. This should give you a pretty good idea of how it works. It'll change. What you see right now may not look like that when you're on there, so it changes a lot. Amazon is always making changes, so don't be surprised when you go into your console and it looks different. Now you have a good overview of Amazon Web Services and see how big they have become in the cloud service arena. But you can also see that Amazon has made it very easy to find out what you need inside their simple to use user interface.